A roaring wall of sand can erase a landscape in hours, yet this same force perfectly preserves entire cities for thousands of years. The wind is history's most surprising guardian, sealing ancient settlements inside the paths of violent sandstorms. By the end of this journey, you will see how the desert's fury created the world's most durable time capsules. We will uncover how everyday objects and grand structures survive, untouched by time, waiting beneath the dunes. How does a force of destruction become an agent of perfect preservation? And what lost worlds are still hidden just out of sight? What does the survival of these places tell you about the resilience of our own civilization? The desert storm arrives not as a gentle breeze but as a grinding, particulate ocean. Its billion individual grains act like a form of liquid sandpaper, scouring everything in their path. This is the storm's bite, a force that can strip paint from steel and etch glass. Yet this same chaotic violence holds a secret. As the wind loses its fury, those abrasive particles begin to settle. They do not simply fall, they drift and accumulate, layer upon delicate layer. This is the storm's embrace, a gradual, almost gentle burial that happens over not one storm but many, across years or even decades. The result is a remarkable transformation. The buried object, whether a simple clay pot or an entire city wall, is suddenly removed from the world of decay. It is sealed inside a sterile, dry tomb, a place with no liquid water, no oxygen for rust or rot, and no sunlight to fuel destructive microbes. The very thing that seemed intent on destroying a civilization instead becomes its most dedicated protector, freezing a single moment under the dunes. We are left to wonder which societies, in their final hours, witnessed the sky darken with what they believed was their end, only to have their world saved by the very force that seemed to consume it. The legend of Ubar began as a whisper on the wind, a story of a city so rich and so arrogant that the desert opened up to swallow it whole. For generations, it was the Atlantis of the sands, a fable from the 1001 Nights thought to be pure fiction, a moral lesson about the dangers of greed. Then, in the late 20th century, a team of archaeologists decided to treat the legend as a map. They used satellite images to trace ancient camel caravan routes across the brutal emptiness of the Rub al-Khali desert. The technology revealed something startling, faint lines and geometric shapes that should not have been there, all converging on one specific, barren spot. Ground-penetrating radar confirmed it, revealing the ghostly outlines of massive walls and towers hidden directly beneath the sand. The dig that followed uncovered the truth. Ubar was real. The city had not been swallowed in a single divine cataclysm, but had suffered a catastrophic natural collapse. The very ground beneath it, a giant limestone cavern, had given way, plunging much of the settlement into a sinkhole. Then the desert did its work. The relentless sandstorms that followed did not destroy the ruins. Instead, they rushed in to fill the cavity, sealing the collapsed city in a dry, sterile tomb for over 1,000 years. Excavations pulled frankincense resin from the preserved rooms, confirming Ubar's legendary status as a hub for the most valuable trade of its era. Here was a myth made solid, a city of towers and treasure preserved not in storybooks but in sand. The wind had saved the evidence, offering up a lost world that proved even our most fantastical stories can be rooted in truth. Deep beneath the sands of Saqqara lies a different kind of preserved world, one built not for the living but for the divine. The Serapeum is an underground city of the dead, a labyrinth of tunnels housing colossal sarcophagi carved from single blocks of granite, each one built to hold the mummified body of a sacred Apis bull. For ancient Egyptians, these bulls were living gods, and their burial required a monument to match their celestial status. The complex sat on the very fringe of the Sahara, a location that seemed perilous, yet became its salvation. Over the centuries, the desert winds did not just blow over this necropolis, they actively participated in its protection. Fine, wind-blown sand constantly seeped into the tunnels, silently filling the corridors and chambers. This was not a violent, sudden burial like a sandstorm on the surface, but a slow, patient, and relentless infiltration. That drifting sand created a perfect environmental seal. It stabilized the interior temperature, protecting the polished granite of the massive coffins from the extreme heat of the day and the chilling cold of the desert night, cycles of expansion and contraction that would have cracked the stone over time. The sand also shielded the intricate hieroglyphics carved into the walls from any moisture or abrasive winds, and perhaps most importantly, it hid the entrance and filled the passages, deterring looters for centuries. The very substance that threatened to erase the complex from memory instead became its guardian, preserving these monumental testaments to faith in a dry, dark, and silent stasis. For over 2,000 years, the Serapeum waited perfectly intact until a determined archaeologist named Auguste Mariette, following a historical clue, uncovered the entrance in 1850 and found a sacred site frozen in time, all thanks to the patient, preserving power of the drifting sand. Those colossal granite coffins and frankincense-filled ruins survived because of a powerful, invisible chemistry. The sand that entombed them is far more than just ground-up rock. It is a sophisticated preservation machine operating on several precise scientific principles. The first and most vital is desiccation. A sand-covered object exists in a world without water. The extreme, relentless dryness of the buried environment halts all bacterial and fungal growth in its tracks. These microorganisms are the primary agents of decay, the tiny creatures that consume wood, textiles, leather, and even food. Without the moisture they need to live, they simply cannot function. A wooden statue buried in a damp forest will rot away in decades, but that same statue sealed in dry sand can remain intact for thousands of years, its carved details as sharp as the day they were made. The sand also acts as a perfect physical shield. Layer upon layer of compacted grains create a formidable barrier that blocks ultraviolet light from the sun. This light is a powerful bleaching agent that fades vibrant pigments in paint and cloth and slowly weakens molecular structures, making materials brittle. Under the sand, colors that would have vanished in a single season on the surface remain locked in place. This sandy blanket also regulates temperature with incredible stability. On the surface, a desert stone can bake under the midday sun and then freeze in the cold of night, constantly expanding and contracting. Over time, this stress creates tiny fractures that grow into major cracks, shattering pottery and splitting monuments. But just a few feet down, the temperature remains constant, protecting objects from this destructive thermal cycling. There is a third, more subtle force at work: the alkaline nature of the sand itself. Many desert sands are chemically basic, creating a hostile environment for the acidic waste products that many decay-causing microbes produce. This is especially crucial for the preservation of bone, which can slowly dissolve in acidic conditions. In the alkaline desert tomb, skeletal remains can last for millennia, preserving the very shapes of the people and animals that once lived there. When you understand these principles, your perception of a sand dune shifts completely. It is no longer a mere pile of dust, but a dynamic, sterile, and temperature-controlled vault. This natural technology is why we can pull a woven basket, a piece of fruit, or a delicate wooden tool from the depths. each item looking as though it was placed there only yesterday. So what specific treasures has this sandy vault managed to save against all odds? The Roman Empire did not just build cities, it stamped its identity onto the landscape with geometric precision. In the North African province of Numidia, Emperor Trajan founded a perfect example of this ambition around the year 100 AD. Timgad was a colonial town for retired soldiers, a reward for their service, and its design was a masterclass in Roman urban planning. Its streets formed a flawless grid, centered on a main avenue called the Decumanus Maximus, lined with columns and leading to a grand arch dedicated to the emperor. It boasted a public library, a theater that could seat thousands, and sophisticated aqueducts that brought fresh water to its baths and fountains. For centuries, it was a bustling center of civic life, a little piece of Rome in the heart of the desert. Then the world changed, the empire's grip weakened, and Berber incursions began to disrupt the peace. The city was sacked, and its population dwindled. As its buildings stood empty, the greatest threat was not further violence but the slow, patient work of the Sahara. The desert did not attack Timgad, it simply moved in. Wind-blown sand, grain by grain, began to fill the streets and pile against the walls. Over generations, this relentless drift buried the entire city, hiding its grand arches and stone-paved roads under a protective blanket of dune. This seemingly destructive act was, in fact, a miraculous act of preservation. Because Timgad was so completely buried, it was saved from the fate of so many other Roman ruins. Its stones were not carted away to be reused in newer villages or mosques. No one built a modern town on top of its foundations. The city remained perfectly intact, a complete three-dimensional blueprint frozen in time. When archaeologists began excavating the site, they did not find scattered ruins. They uncovered an entire urban plan, a ghostly map of Roman civilization waiting to be read. They could walk the original streets, see the ruts worn into the stone by centuries of chariot wheels, and stand in the theater exactly as an audience member would have nearly 2,000 years ago. The sand did not just preserve the buildings of Timgad, it preserved the very idea of the city, allowing us to understand Roman daily life, civic pride, and architectural genius with a clarity that is almost unparalleled. The wind and sand created a perfect snapshot, a moment in urban history that never faded away. The true testament to this sandy vault is not found in the stone that endures, but in the delicate objects that should have vanished. A wooden comb, its teeth still perfectly spaced, a woven basket, its intricate pattern clear and tight, even a simple loaf of bread, left uneaten thousands of years ago, still holding its familiar shape. These are the miracles of preservation, the fragile organic treasures recovered from places like the Tarim Basin that offer a whisper of daily life directly into our time. These materials, wood, textiles, and food, are normally the first to succumb to time, consumed by the invisible armies of bacteria and fungi that thrive on moisture and oxygen. But when a violent sandstorm delivers a rapid, deep burial, it creates a sudden and absolute crisis for those agents of decay. The environment is stripped of oxygen, a process called anoxia, and all moisture is instantly wicked away by the thirsty sand. In this sterile, dry tomb, a microbe finds itself in a world without the fundamental resources it needs to live, let alone consume a piece of fruit or a woolen tunic. The result is a form of suspended animation. A colorful textile, its dyes vibrant, is spared from the fading power of sunlight and the rot that comes from dampness. The wooden handle of a tool does not warp or splinter. Grains of wheat and shriveled pieces of fruit become freeze-dried relics of ancient meals. These objects are not grand monuments to kings or gods. They are the intimate artifacts of ordinary existence. To hold a wooden comb is to feel a connection to the person who once pulled it through their hair. To see the weave of a basket is to understand the skill and patience of its creator. These fragile survivors, rescued from beneath the dunes, become the most poignant storytellers, transforming abstract history into a tangible, human narrative. They tell us not of empires and conquests, but of breakfast, of craftsmanship, of the simple, beautiful details of a life lived long ago. The same abrasive power that scours the surface can also carve out a sanctuary. Far from the open desert in the heart of Turkey, the wind performed a different kind of magic in Cappadocia. Here, it worked not with pure sand, but with a constant stream of wind-blown volcanic ash and dust, acting as a natural sandblaster on an epic scale. Its patient, millions of years-long project was to sculpt a landscape of surreal, towering fairy chimneys and, more importantly, to soften and shape the region's unique rock. This rock is called tuff, a soft, malleable stone formed from compacted volcanic ash. It is hard enough to hold its shape, yet soft enough to be carved with simple hand tools. This perfect, workable medium was the wind's gift to the people, and they used it to create something astonishing. They did not build cities upward, they carved them downward, deep into the earth. The result was not a simple collection of caves, but vast, multi-level subterranean metropolises like Derinkuyu and Kaymakli. These underground worlds were engineering marvels, complete with living quarters, stables for livestock, churches with arched ceilings, and even specialized rooms for pressing wine. Intricate ventilation shafts plunged hundreds of feet down to provide fresh air, while massive, circular stone doors, weighing half a ton each, could be rolled across passages to seal the inhabitants safely inside from any threat. The wind's role did not end with carving the soft rock. Subsequent depositions of that same volcanic ash and dust acted like a natural camouflage, settling over the landscape and obscuring the thousands of entrances to this hidden world. This sealing layer, combined with the deep underground location, created a perfectly stable environment. The temperature remained constant year-round, protecting everything within from the damaging cycles of heat and cold that fracture stone and rot organic materials on the surface. The wind, in a profound partnership with human ingenuity and geology, did not merely preserve a city, it helped to form its very walls and then worked to conceal its existence. These cave towns stand as a powerful testament to a civilization that looked at a landscape shaped by elemental fury and saw not an obstacle, but an opportunity to create a secret, enduring world safe from whatever storms, natural or human, raged above. The very climate shifts that threaten our future are now unsealing chapters from our deepest past. As global temperatures rise and weather patterns intensify, the world's great deserts are becoming more active. The wind is picking up speed and the dunes are on the move. In the vast expanses of the Gobi and the Taklamakan, previously stable dune fields, anchored for centuries by scant vegetation, are now shifting. This monumental rearrangement of the landscape is acting like a giant, slow-motion archaeological dig, directed by the forces of nature. The same sandstorms that once buried these sites are now, in a new cycle of desert life, peeling back the layers. The crest of a migrating dune might slip away to reveal the top of a stone wall. A fierce, localized wind might scour out a hollow at the base of a sand hill, exposing the wooden posts of an ancient cemetery or the fragmented rim of a pottery jar. These are not planned excavations, they are spontaneous gifts from a changing planet, offering glimpses of civilizations we never knew existed. For archaeologists, this creates a frantic race against the elements. A tomb sealed for 3,000 years can be destroyed in 3 seasons once exposed to sun, rain, and wind. The very conditions that preserved it for millennia, the stable darkness and dryness, are instantly shattered. And the exposure brings another human threat, looters who follow the shifting sands, eager to strip these newly revealed sites of any valuable artifacts, erasing their context and their story forever. Yet within this urgency lies a profound revelation. The process of wind preservation is not a one-time event locked in the distant past. It is a dynamic, ongoing conversation between the Earth and its atmosphere. The climate is a new and unpredictable curator, a librarian in a vast desert archive who is now opening random books and leaving them out on a table, challenging us to read them before they turn to dust. This forces us to confront a powerful question as the wind reshapes our world. What other lost cities is it preparing to offer back to us? There is a city on the edge of the Sahara where the wind preserved a conversation between continents. The ruins of Saini in Mali are not just the bones of an old settlement. They are a library written in clay and stone, a testament to an empire that mastered the desert. Long before the famed city of Gao reached its peak, Saini was a thriving hub, a crucial node in the vast network of trans-Saharan trade routes. Its gradual burial under the Saharan sands was not a tragedy, but a historical rescue mission. The most remarkable survivors here are not made of stone, but of sun-dried mud brick. In any other climate, these structures would have melted back into the earth with the first heavy rains, their forms lost forever. But the desert wind, by piling layer upon layer of dry sand against them, did something extraordinary. It shielded the fragile bricks from the one thing that could destroy them: water. This sandy cocoon allowed the very architecture of the city to endure, preserving the footprints of houses, workshops, and grand buildings. Yet the sand safeguarded something even more telling: the words of the people themselves. Archaeologists have uncovered Islamic tombstones made of marble and local stone, intricately inscribed with Kufic script. These are not simple markers. They are sophisticated epigraphic records, naming merchants and nobles, and dating back to the 12th century. They are concrete proof that this West African empire was deeply connected to the broader Islamic world, its scholars and traders exchanging goods, ideas, and faith across the brutal expanse of the desert. The wind, by sealing Saini in its dry tomb, did more than save a city. It preserved the evidence of a sophisticated, globally connected civilization that flourished where few believed it could, forcing us to rewrite the history of medieval Africa. These wind-blown layers are more than just piles of sand. They are a language. Archaeologists call this science stratigraphy, the art of reading history in the sequence of soil and sediment. In a typical excavation, layers are laid down by human activity or slow natural processes, but in the desert, the primary author is the wind. Each major sandstorm acts like a frantic scribe, depositing a new sheet over the landscape. This burial seems chaotic, a random dumping of dust, yet to a trained eye, the chaos holds a perfect order. The key is that newer layers always lie on top of older ones, creating a vertical timeline. By meticulously excavating this sequence, scientists can peel back time itself, reading the story of a settlement's life and its eventual silence written in the sand. A single, distinct band of sand packed with the debris of daily life, broken pottery, scattered tools, and ash from a last meal, can tell a story of sudden catastrophe, perhaps a raid or a plague that forced people to flee. Directly above it, a thick, sterile layer of pure, clean sand speaks of a different kind of event, a prolonged period of intense drought and ferocious storms where no one lived there at all, the wind reclaiming its territory for a generation. Then a new layer might appear with different styles of pottery, signaling that a new people with a new culture moved in once the climate softened. The wind did not just preserve the objects it buried, it recorded the very pulse of the civilization, its moments of prosperity, its tragedies, and the changing climate that shaped its destiny. This layered narrative challenges us to look deeper, to see the sand not as a blanket, but as a detailed diary of a lost world, one we are only just learning to read. The silence of the Taklamakan Desert holds the echo of caravan bells. On the desiccated shores of the great salt marsh Lop Nur, the Lulan kingdom once flourished as a vital oasis, a green jewel on the brutal Silk Road. For centuries, it was a necessary haven, a place where merchants from Rome, Persia, India, and China could find water and rest before braving the next deadly stretch of dunes. But the desert is a demanding landlord. The lifeblood of Lulan was the Tarim River, and when its waters slowly shifted course, the kingdom began to strangle. The green fields withered, and the desert, sensing weakness, began its final advance. The sandstorms that had always threatened the city now became its undertakers, burying its wooden dwellings and its central Buddhist stupa under a deep, dry blanket. This was not a swift end, but a slow, suffocating burial that perfectly preserved a moment of cosmopolitan life. The most startling discovery in this sandy tomb was not a building, but a person. She is known as the Lulan Beauty, a mummy so perfectly preserved by the dry, salty sand that she seems merely asleep. Her face, with its high cheekbones and long nose, is distinctly Caucasian, a silent testament to the incredible ethnic diversity that pulsed along the Silk Road. She was not an isolated traveler, but rather proof that this remote outpost was a melting pot of cultures and peoples. The same preserving conditions that guarded her body also saved the paperwork of the city. Archaeologists found wooden slips and tablets covered in Kharosthi script, an ancient writing system from the region of Gandhara. These were not epic poems or religious texts, but the mundane records of daily life, tax receipts, legal documents, and military orders. They offer a frozen glimpse into the bustling administrative heart of a Silk Roadway station, a place where goods were taxed, disputes were settled, and caravans were logged, all just before the sand swept in and sealed the archive over 1,500 years ago. Lulan's story is one of both fragility and endurance, a reminder that the forces which make a civilization can also unmake it, while the wind patiently records the entire transaction. The moment a single grain of sand is brushed away, a silent clock begins to tick. After thousands of years of perfect stability, a wind-preserved site enters its final, most vulnerable chapter. This unveiling forces a profound ethical question upon the modern world. Should we dig or should we leave it be? Excavation offers knowledge, a chance to read the stories sealed within the dunes. But that very act of discovery initiates a rapid and irreversible decay. An object perfectly preserved in sterile, dry darkness is suddenly assaulted by our world. Modern air carries moisture and pollutants. Sunlight bleaches vibrant pigments in a matter of days. Fluctuating temperatures and humidity cause wood to warp and crack, and salts within ancient pottery can crystallize and explode the vessel from the inside out. The very act of saving an artifact from the sand can be the thing that destroys it. Beyond the science of decay lies the human threat. A newly uncovered site is a magnet, drawing both well-meaning tourists and opportunistic looters. The crush of feet can erode ancient pathways in a season, while looters seeking a single valuable relic will shatter the priceless context of an entire room, destroying the story forever. This dilemma has split the field of archaeology into two thoughtful camps. One advocates for minimal intervention, for leaving these treasures exactly where the wind left them. They champion non-invasive technologies like LiDAR and ground-penetrating radar, which can map entire cities hidden beneath the sand without ever breaking the surface. This approach treats the site as a protected archive, a collection of data to be saved for a future generation with even better, less destructive technologies. The other camp argues that waiting is the greater risk, with climate change intensifying, desert storms and human expansion encroaching on once remote areas. They believe that a site left in the ground is a site that could be lost to erosion or construction within a decade. For them, proactive, careful excavation is a form of rescue archaeology, a race to preserve knowledge before the natural and human forces that once protected a site now conspire to erase it completely. This is not a simple argument between right and wrong. It is a painful calculation about our role as stewards. The wind's preservation was a temporary gift, a pause button pressed on history. Our responsibility is to decide with immense care when and how to press play. A world away from the bustling crowds of Petra, its southern sister stood in silent grandeur. Hegra, known today as Al-Haya, was the Nabatean Empire's crucial southern capital, a fortress of trade and tomb carving in the heart of the Arabian desert. Here, the wind engaged in a delicate, million-year-long negotiation with the stone. The same desert gales that threatened the city also became its most unlikely artisan and guardian. The massive tomb facades, hewn directly from the sandstone outcrops, were subjected to a constant, gentle abrasion. Over centuries, this natural sandblasting did not simply wear the stone away. It carefully scoured the surface, peeling back the softer, more vulnerable outer layers of rock to reveal a harder, more resilient stone core beneath. In a strange paradox, the wind was simultaneously eroding the surface while fortifying it, leaving behind a tougher, more durable canvas. Meanwhile, the sand at ground level played a different role. As the wind whipped around the monumental structures, it deposited great drifts of sand that piled protectively against the lower portions of the tombs and the foundations of the entire city. This sandy buffer shielded the most vulnerable bases from the full force of wind-driven grit, preventing undercutting and the catastrophic collapse that would have followed. This complex partnership ensured the survival of Hegra's most precious historical records, the intricate carvings and inscriptions that adorn the tombs. Deeply chiseled depictions of Nabatean gods like Dashara and Al-Azhar, alongside detailed inscriptions outlining funerary rites and ownership, have endured with stunning clarity. They were spared the more extreme erosion that would have smoothed them into oblivion, thanks to the wind's dual role as both etcher and preserver. Walking through Hegra today is to walk through a less crowded but equally magnificent archive of a powerful trading empire, its story literally written in stone and saved by the very elements that once seemed intent on its destruction. Finding a city beneath the desert is a search for a whisper in a roaring gale. The technological leap from a simple trowel to a satellite's eye has fundamentally reshaped this quest, allowing us to see through the sand without disturbing a single grain. Satellite imagery acts as our widest lens, scanning thousands of square miles from orbit. Programs like NASA Landsat do not see cities directly, but they detect the ghostly signatures of human activity. A buried stone wall affects how moisture evaporates from the soil above it, creating a subtle difference in vegetation health. From space, this appears as a faint, straight line of slightly greener or browner earth, a crop mark that betrays the geometry of a hidden structure. These spectral lines and patterns, invisible to anyone standing on the dune, form a map of whispers from the past, guiding ground teams to the most promising locations. Once a site is identified from orbit, the search zooms in with breathtaking precision using LiDAR, or light detection and ranging. Mounted on an airplane or a drone, this system fires millions of laser pulses at the ground. By measuring the time it takes for each pulse to bounce back, It creates an exquisitely detailed three-dimensional model of the Earth's surface. The true magic happens with a digital filter that can strip away every tree, bush, and even the top layer of sand itself. What remains is a bare Earth model, a ghostly digital landscape that reveals the humps and depressions of completely buried foundations, roadways, and irrigation canals. It is like pulling back a digital curtain to see the shape of the lost city beneath. For the final confirmation, there is ground-penetrating radar. This device is slowly dragged across the sand, sending radio waves into the Earth. When these waves hit a solid object like a wall or a hollow tomb, they bounce back with a different signature. The result is a subterranean sonogram, a cross-sectional view that can distinguish between a natural rock layer and the straight edge of a human-made structure. This trio of technologies transforms archaeology from a guessing game into a targeted science. We can now map an entire buried settlement, understanding its streets and its scale, before we ever commit to the irreversible act of digging. This careful, data-driven approach ensures that when we finally do brush away the sand, we are not just treasure hunters but readers of a story, prepared to understand every fragile page. Across the world in a coastal desert, the wind wrote a different kind of preservation story. The Soup Valley of Peru is a landscape of stark, arid hills, a place where the ocean breeze carries not moisture, but a constant, fine dust from the crumbling slopes. Here, the sacred city of Caral rose to prominence over 4,600 years ago, a contemporary of the great Egyptian pyramids. This was the cradle of Andean civilization, a complex society of farmers and fishermen who built immense pyramidal structures and sunken circular plazas for their rituals. Then, for reasons still debated, the city was abandoned. The wind and sand, patient as always, moved in. Over the centuries, the same dust that filled the air began to settle over the plazas and mounds, drifting into the abandoned structures. This was not a cataclysmic storm, but a gradual, gentle burial that protected the city from the rare but destructive rains that could have melted its earthen architecture back into the hills. The hyper-arid conditions sealed by the sandy blanket created a perfect preserving environment. When archaeologists uncovered the site, they found something almost unbelievable. The stepped pyramids were so intact that the original construction materials were still in place. They discovered bundles of shikra, the knotted reed bags that workers used to haul stones and earth up the growing structures, left exactly where they were dropped millennia ago. In the dry silence, they also found collections of musical instruments, flutes meticulously crafted from the bones of pelicans and condors, and from cane. These were not crude noisemakers, but sophisticated devices capable of producing complex melodies, proof that ceremony and art were central to this ancient society. The wind's quiet work in this Peruvian valley did more than save stone and reed. It safeguarded the very sound of a civilization's beginning, offering us a whisper of the music that once echoed between its pyramids. The most profound connection to the past is often found in a single, silent footprint. The grandest monuments and most intricate artifacts tell us what these people built, but it is the human remains themselves that whisper who they were. In the bone-dry tombs of the Tarim Basin, the bodies of men, women, and children were so perfectly preserved by the desiccating sand that their faces remain recognizable, their clothing still vibrant. Forensic scientists acting as time-traveling physicians can examine these individuals and read the stories of their lives etched into their very skeletons. The analysis of tooth enamel reveals a childhood diet, showing if a person was born locally or migrated from a distant land. Patterns of arthritis in the spine and joints speak of a lifetime spent in hard labor, perhaps grinding grain or hauling water. A healed fracture on a forearm tells a tale of survival and community care, while an unhealed wound might reveal a violent end during a city's final, desperate hours. In places like Timgad, skeletons found crushed beneath collapsed walls are not merely rubble, they are frozen moments of catastrophe. One individual might be curled in a protective posture, another caught in a desperate flight toward a doorway. These are not anonymous statistics, they are personal tragedies, the final breath of a civilization made agonizingly tangible. To look upon the face of the Lulan beauty, with her high cheekbones and delicate features, is to be struck by a profound realization. She was a person who laughed, loved, and worried just like you. Her preserved existence bridges the vast chasm of centuries, transforming abstract history into a shared human experience. The wind, in its relentless passage, did more than save cities. It saved the people who called them home, allowing us to mourn their losses and marvel at their resilience, forging a connection that time itself could not erase. A deep earth tremor did not just topple the buildings of Siraf, it shattered the city's very reason for being. This thriving Persian Gulf port, a humming nexus of medieval commerce, was struck by a massive earthquake in the 10th century that wrecked its intricate network of qanats, the underground canals that channeled life-giving water from the distant mountains. With its water supply severed, the city's fate was sealed. The surrounding desert, held at bay for centuries by the bustle of human activity, saw its opening. Fine, wind-blown silt and sand began to pour down from the arid mountains, drifting through the cracked walls of merchant villas and settling in the quiet courtyards of Grand Friday mosques. The same forces that had choked the city now began to protect it, laying down a sterile blanket that would guard Siraf's bones for 1,000 years. Excavations have pulled a map of the ancient world from this sandy tomb. In the ruins of a shipwright's workshop, archaeologists found Chinese celadon porcelain, its jade-green glaze still luminous. From the floor of a wealthy trader's home came carnelian beads from India and finely worked tusks of African ivory. Each artifact is a data point in a forgotten economic network, proving that spices, timber, and gems flowed through this port in a constant stream, connecting the markets of Baghdad to the shores of Zanzibar and the harbors of Canton. The sand did not merely save stone foundations and clay walls, it preserved a vibrant, multicultural hub, a bustling economic engine whose gears were turned by merchants, sailors, and craftsmen from across the known world. This was globalization in the age of the sail, a complex web of exchange sealed perfectly beneath the dunes, waiting to rewrite our understanding of the medieval economy. A legend is a powerful seed planted in the human imagination and watered by the wind. The story of Ubar proved that some myths hold a kernel of truth, but for every city confirmed, there are a dozen phantom settlements that remain tantalizingly out of reach. The lost army of Cambyses is one such specter. The Greek historian Herodotus wrote that a force of 50,000 Persian soldiers was sent to attack the oracle of Ammon at Siwa Oasis, only to be swallowed by a cataclysmic sandstorm in the Egyptian desert. It is a dramatic tale of divine retribution, but despite numerous searches, not a single piece of conclusive evidence, no mass grave, no scattered weapons, has ever been found. This is where the romance of the legend meets the rigor of the scientific method. The process of verification is a meticulous detective game, one that cross-references ancient texts with hard geological data. If a story describes a city destroyed by a sandstorm, researchers will analyze sediment cores from the region, looking for layers of wind-blown sand that correspond to the historical time frame. They will use carbon dating on any organic material found at a potential site, whether it is a piece of wood from a building or a bone from a trash heap, to establish an absolute calendar date for its occupation. The remote sensing technologies we discussed earlier, the LiDAR and satellite imagery, are deployed not just to find things, but to rule areas out, to systematically scan thousands of square miles and confirm that no large-scale structures exist where the legend insists they should be. This rigorous process transforms a captivating story into a testable hypothesis. It is a necessary filter that separates historical fact from literary fiction, ensuring that our understanding of the past is built on the solid ground of evidence rather than the shifting sands of folklore. Yet the enduring power of these tales is itself a kind of artifact. The human desire to believe in a lost world just beyond the next dune, a kingdom hidden in plain sight, speaks to something deep within us. It is a testament to our innate curiosity and our longing for mystery in a world that often feels fully mapped and explained. The wind preserves the cities, but our collective imagination keeps the legends alive, ensuring that the search for these forgotten places is a quest that never truly ends. Buried under the coastal plains of Eritrea, the port of Adulis was the bustling maritime gateway to the mighty Axumite Empire. While Axum itself is famed for its towering stone obelisks inland, its connection to the wider world was secured here on the shores of the Red Sea. For centuries, this was a nexus of global commerce, where African gold, ivory, and exotic animals were traded for Roman glass and Indian spices. Yet the very forces that gave it life eventually conspired to seal its fate. The slow, persistent work of wind-blown sand from the adjacent desert, combined with silt washed down from the eroding highlands, began to clog the city's vital harbor. Grain by grain, layer by layer, the port silted up, becoming useless for large trading vessels. As commerce dwindled, the desert advanced, and the city was gradually abandoned to the elements. The wind and sediment that had choked its economy then performed their familiar paradoxical magic, laying down a deep, protective blanket over the entire urban landscape. Modern excavations have peeled back this blanket to reveal a city frozen in a state of suspended animation. Archaeologists found a remarkably well-planned metropolis, with wide streets leading to large administrative buildings, spacious merchant warehouses, and ornate early Christian churches. The preservation was so complete that the very footprints of daily life remained intact. Within these sand-sealed rooms, the story of Axum's reach was written in artifacts. Caches of distinctive Axumite coins, stamped with the faces of forgotten kings, lay alongside fine red slip pottery imported from the Roman Empire. But perhaps the most telling finds were the raw materials of its legendary trade, piles of carefully cut elephant ivory and stacks of tortoiseshell, ready for export to the workshops of Rome and Byzantium. This sandy tomb did more than just save a city. It preserved a crucial missing link in a global economic chain. Adulis stands as silent, undeniable proof of a sophisticated maritime network that directly connected the Mediterranean world with the interior of Africa and the vast markets of the Indian Ocean. It is a chapter of ancient globalization, a story of empires in dialogue, whose pages were not written on parchment but perfectly preserved in sand. The future of these sandy time capsules now faces a new and more dangerous storm, one of human pressure and a changing climate. The very forces that once protected these sites are now conspiring to expose them, just as new threats emerge. Looters, armed with satellite imagery of their own, follow the shifting dunes to strip newly revealed tombs of their artifacts, selling a piece of history on the black market and destroying its context forever. Unsustainable tourism, while well-meaning, can be just as destructive. The crush of thousands of footsteps erodes ancient pathways in a single season, while the humidity from a crowd's breath can begin to degrade paint and plaster that survived for millennia in perfect dryness. Meanwhile, the accelerating pace of climate change intensifies desert weather patterns, with stronger winds and flash floods scouring away protective layers of sand faster than ever before. And the relentless expansion of modern cities and farms steadily encroaches on the empty spaces where these ruins sleep, turning an archaeological site into a construction zone overnight. Yet within this crisis lies incredible opportunity. Imagine a classroom in another country where students can don a virtual reality headset and stand in the very center of a buried city, walking its streets and examining artifacts in 3 dimensions, all without a single grain of sand being disturbed. This technology offers a form of perfect, weightless access. On the ground, improved conservation techniques are being developed to fight back against decay. Scientists are creating chemical consolidants that can be gently applied to exposed mud brick, essentially giving it a new molecular skeleton to resist wind and water. A growing movement of citizen science invites anyone with a passion for the past to help archaeologists sift through satellite images online, searching for the telltale geometric shapes of a hidden settlement, turning the global public into a legion of protectors. The path forward demands a new kind of collaboration. Archaeologists must work with local communities to ensure that the guardianship of these places benefits those who live nearest to them. Governments need to create and enforce protected cultural zones. Technology companies can partner with research institutions to refine the digital tools that allow us to preserve sites in data, even if they cannot be saved in stone. The wind spent thousands of years building this irreplaceable archive. Our responsibility is to become its diligent librarians, ensuring these stories are not lost in the careless noise of our own time, but are instead studied with reverence, celebrated with wonder, and protected for every generation that follows. Other natural forces create their own time capsules, but each holds the past in a different kind of grip. High in the Alps, the ice is a deep freezer, preserving the body of a man like Ötzi for over 5,000 years. His leather clothing, his last meal, even the tattoos on his skin were kept in perfect detail by the constant, unyielding cold. Yet this preservation is fragile, entirely dependent on a frozen state. As global temperatures rise, glaciers retreat, and these frozen archives begin to melt, their organic treasures are released only to rot away in the modern air. In the dense, waterlogged darkness of a peat bog, a different chemistry takes over. The acidic, oxygen-starved environment tans human skin and soft tissue into leather, creating mummies with eerily preserved faces like those of Toland man. You can see the stubble on his chin and the leather cap on his head, but that same acid slowly dissolves calcium phosphate, the mineral that gives our skeletons their strength. A body pulled from a bog may have a perfect face, but its bones can be as soft as soap, leaving the physical structure of the person lost. Then there is the volcanic fury of a place like Pompeii. The superheated ash that fell from Mount Vesuvius carbonized and encased everything in its path, creating heartbreakingly perfect voids of people and animals in their final moments. It captured the shape of life with breathtaking immediacy, but the intense heat incinerated nearly all the organic material within those casts. The wooden furniture, the woven baskets, the food in the pantry, all were vaporized, leaving behind haunting silhouettes in solid rock. Sandstorm preservation achieves something distinct from all of these. It does not freeze, tan, or cast its subjects. It desiccates them in a sterile, dark, and temperature-stable vault. This combination is uniquely comprehensive. While ice saves organic matter but is vulnerable to thaw, and ash saves forms but destroys contents, and peat saves soft tissue but consumes bone, the desert sand saves them all. Within a single buried room, you can find the stone walls, the metal tools, the wooden loom, the colorful woolen textile on it, and even the grains of wheat in a clay pot next to it. No other natural process so effectively presses pause on the decay of an entire, functioning world, safeguarding the full spectrum of human existence from the monumental to the mundane. The silence of the Libyan desert holds the ghost of a kingdom. Far from being a land of empty dunes, the Fezzan region was once the heartland of the Garamantes, a people who performed a miracle of hydraulic engineering. They did not merely survive the desert, they tamed it, building a network of prosperous oasis cities where none should have existed. Their secret was hidden deep underground, a vast system of tunnels known as fagaras. These were not simple wells, but complex subterranean aqueducts that sloped gently for miles, tapping into ancient fossil water reserves trapped in the rock. For centuries, this system turned the desert green, supporting agriculture and a settled, urban way of life. But the climate was slowly changing, becoming even more relentlessly arid. The fossil water, a non-renewable resource, eventually began to run out. As the fields dried up, the cities were gradually abandoned, and the desert, patient as ever, began its reclamation project. The wind-blown sands of the Ain Ghazal did not destroy these settlements, they sealed them in a protective cocoon. This sandy burial was a blessing for their distinctive architecture, which was made from mud brick, a material that would normally dissolve back into the earth with the first heavy rain. The drifting dunes shielded the fragile bricks, preserving the footprints of entire city blocks, complete with houses, public buildings, and fortified granaries. The sand also guarded their elaborate tombs, pyramidal structures that rose from the desert floor, marking the final resting places of a sophisticated elite. For a long time, classical Roman historians dismissed the Garamantes as mere nomadic raiders. The wind-preserved ruins tell a dramatically different story. They reveal the foundations of a centralized state with a capital city, Garama, that boasted a complex social hierarchy and mastered a technology that allowed it to flourish for nearly 1,000 years. The very sand that buried their world kept the evidence safe, forcing a complete rewrite of North African history. This was not a story of nomads, but of urban pioneers whose greatest legacy was saved from oblivion by the desert's embrace. Each grain of sand removed from a buried city is an act of creation and an act of destruction. The process is irreversible, which is why the modern archaeologist's toolkit is designed for maximum revelation with minimum loss. This work is a far cry from the treasure hunting of popular imagination. It is a precise, painstaking science conducted with the delicacy of a surgeon and the patience of a monk. Under the protective shade of large white tents, which shield the fragile site from the relentless sun, teams work inch by inch, their primary tools often resembling those of a dentist. Fine dental picks and soft bristled brushes are used to gently coax sand away from a fragile surface, perhaps the painted cheek of a ceramic face or the woven edge of a textile that has not felt the air for 2,000 years. Every speck of dirt is not simply tossed aside. It is carefully collected and passed through a series of fine mesh sieves where it is washed and sorted. This meticulous process recovers the smallest treasures, the things that tell the richest stories, a single carnelian bead from a broken necklace, a charred seed from a last meal, or a fish scale from a forgotten dinner, all of which would be lost to a less careful method. But the physical uncovering is only half the task. Before a single object is moved, it is documented in situ, precisely where it was found. This is where technology performs its own kind of magic. Using a technique called photogrammetry, an archaeologist will take hundreds of overlapping photographs of an artifact or an entire excavation layer from every possible angle. Specialized software then stitches these images together into a perfect, measurable three-dimensional digital model. This model becomes a permanent record, capturing the exact position of a skeleton's hand or the orientation of a fallen column, allowing researchers to revisit the moment of discovery again and again, long after the actual objects have been taken to a museum. Perhaps the most crucial tool is one of preservation, not just excavation. As soon as a fragile material like mud brick or painted plaster is exposed to the modern atmosphere, it begins to weaken. Archaeologists carry small spray bottles filled with special consolidants, liquid chemicals that are gently misted onto the surface. These solutions seep into the porous material, binding its particles together and giving it a new strength to withstand the elements, essentially providing an invisible scaffold that prevents it from crumbling to dust before their eyes. This entire ballet of brushes, picks, and pixels transforms the destructive act of digging into a science of careful revelation. It ensures that every fragment, no matter how small, contributes its voice to the story, and that the city's final moments are not just uncovered, but truly understood. Long before empires rose, a small community in the Jordan Valley was already wrestling with the divine. The settlement at Ain Ghazal thrived for over 1,000 years, a sprawling Neolithic village where some of the world's first farmers cultivated crops and built multi-roomed houses from stone. Its initial preservation was not the work of dramatic sandstorms, but a quieter, more patient process. Fine, wind-blown loess and dust, carried on the breeze for centuries, settled over the abandoned site, creating a stable, dry blanket that protected its most fragile secrets from the ravages of time. This gentle burial would prove essential, for the people of Ain Ghazal were not just farmers, they were visionaries. Deep beneath the sediment, archaeologists made a find that would rewrite the history of art. They uncovered a cache of statues unlike anything known from that era, crafted from a mixture of lime plaster and reed, standing nearly a meter tall. These were among the very first large-scale human representations ever created, a monumental leap in human expression. The dry, stable environment sealed by the wind-blown dust was absolutely critical. Without that protective layer, these delicate plaster sculptures, made over 9,000 years ago, would have simply crumbled back into the earth, their forms lost forever. The most haunting details are the eyes. The artists meticulously inlaid them with bitumen, a dark, tar-like substance, often framing them with cowrie shells that still hold a lifelike sheen. These are not simple figures, they are beings with a palpable presence. Some have two heads, others feature intricate patterns painted on their bodies, suggesting they were not portraits of the living, but powerful symbols of ancestors, spirits, or gods. Here, the wind did not preserve a city of stone or a tomb of treasure. It safeguarded something far more profound, the very dawn of symbolic thought and artistic ambition. In the silent, shell-inlaid gaze of these statues, we meet the moment humanity first attempted to give tangible form to the intangible, to make the unseen world visible, and in doing so, fundamentally invented our own capacity for culture, ritual, and belief. Deserts hold our history because they are lands of stark consequence. The same brutal rules that govern survival there also dictate preservation. Think of the world's first great civilizations, the ones that laid the foundation for everything to come. They almost invariably rose along the banks of life-giving rivers, veins of water threading through a dry world. The Nile carved its path through the Sahara, the Tigris and Euphrates wound through the arid plains of Mesopotamia, and the Indus River flowed from the Himalayas into the Thar Desert. These river valleys were cradles, offering the water and fertile soil needed to support dense populations, bureaucracies, and monumental building projects. But their hinterlands, the vast territories just beyond the reach of irrigation, were always the desert. This geographical fact is the key to understanding why these places became time capsules. When a civilization in these regions collapsed, whether from climate shift, political upheaval, or economic failure, its cities were not immediately reclaimed. In a temperate or tropical landscape, an abandoned settlement is quickly consumed. Rain and humidity rot wooden beams, freeze-thaw cycles crack stone, and aggressive plant roots pry apart the strongest foundations. Within a few generations, the forest or jungle swallows everything, leaving little more than a faint mound in the earth. But in the desert, the process of decay is arrested almost completely. The lack of liquid water halts the biological engines of rot. The scarcity of vegetation means there are no roots to tear structures apart. The site is simply left to the sun and the wind, a skeleton waiting. And the very harshness that makes life a struggle ensures that no one else comes to build on top of the ruins. Why would a new society choose to settle in a waterless, barren landscape when greener pastures are available elsewhere? This lack of subsequent human activity is just as important as the climate itself. In Europe or Southeast Asia, a Roman fort might have a medieval village built on its stones, which in turn is buried under a modern town. The past is constantly being recycled and erased. In the desert, the past is left alone. The wind and sand then perform their final, gentle act, not as agents of destruction, but as curators. They drift over the abandoned streets and toppled columns, laying down a protective blanket that shields the ruins from the sun's bleaching rays and the rare but destructive flash flood. This creates a perfect, sterile museum display case, so when we walk into a desert, we are not entering an empty wasteland. We are stepping into the world's greatest open-air archive, a place where the pages of history were not torn up and reused, but were simply closed and set carefully upon a shelf, waiting for us to learn how to read them once more. This journey through the sandy tombs of history reveals a profound truth. The very forces we perceive as agents of destruction can become the most faithful guardians of our legacy. We have walked the grid-patterned streets of Timgad, frozen by the desert's drift, and stood in the silent, sculpted chambers of Cappadocia, a world carved with the wind's assistance. We have met the Lulan beauty, her face a bridge across millennia, and deciphered the merchant records of Saini, all saved from time's usual decay by the relentless, preserving embrace of the sand. These places collectively challenge a fundamental perspective, urging us to see the environment not as a perpetual adversary to be conquered, but as a dynamic partner in the long story of civilization. This is a partnership of immense power, one that can erase a landscape just as easily as it can protect a city, a relationship built on a delicate and often unforgiving balance. As we now navigate a future of intensifying environmental change, these wind-preserved sites stand as monumental reminders. They speak to the breathtaking fragility of our endeavors, how a shifted river course or a prolonged drought can silence a bustling metropolis. Yet they also testify to an incredible resilience, demonstrating that a memory, a story, or an entire way of life can endure against all odds when granted the right conditions. The next time you feel the sting of sand on the wind, or watch a dust cloud darken the horizon, consider this. You are witnessing the same elemental force that has patiently built the world's most durable time capsules. That gust might just be carrying a secret from a world long gone, a whisper from a forgotten people, waiting patiently for its story to be heard once more. If this journey into the desert's hidden archives has sparked your curiosity, you can help support our channel by liking this video and subscribing for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries. We are building a community of fellow adventurers here, and your voice is a vital part of it. Tell us in the comments below which lost city or civilization captures your imagination the most. Is it the fabled Atlantis, the mountain fortress of Machu Picchu, or another enigmatic site waiting to be fully understood? Your insights fuel our future quests for knowledge. History's greatest stories are not always confined to library shelves. Often, they lie just beneath the surface, hidden in plain sight, biding their time until a shift in the wind finally reveals the echoes of a world we had forgotten. Until our next adventure together, keep looking closer at the world around you. You never know what secrets the next breeze might